The sword of Elendil was forged anew by elvish smiths, and on its blade was traced a device of 7 stars set between the crescent moon and the rayed sun. And about them was written many runes, for Aragorn, son of Arathorn, was going to war upon the marches of Mordor. Very bright was that sword when it was made whole again. The light of the sun shone redly in it, and the light of the moon shone cold. And its edge was hard and keen. And Aragorn gave it a new name, and called it Andúril, Flame of the West.
Throughout Book 1 of The Lord of the Rings, the figure Aragorn carries the shards of the legendary blade, Narsil, the blade that was broken. And as the Company of the Ring sets out to aid Frodo in his quest to destroy the One Ring, after the Council of Elrond in Book 2, Aragorn no longer carries the shards of Narsil, but the sword reforged, Andúril, the Flame of the West, the sword of Elendil forged anew as the sword of Aragorn. Until the very end of the story, this sword is referenced time and time again, seemingly becoming a part of the character of Aragorn. What makes this sword so special? Is it more powerful than other blades? Is it greater than other blades? This video will explore the sword that was broken and forged again, and its importance as a symbol of a king, as important as any crown is to any other king. Before getting into what I think is important, what the sword itself represents, I think it would be interesting to give a brief history of this sword, and share some of the interesting properties that have perhaps been overshadowed by great weapons carried by others. The gleaming blades held by Gandalf and Frodo, for instance, Glamdring and Sting respectively, both shining with a cold light in the presence of orcs. Narsil, and in turn Andúril, also demonstrate interesting properties. Andúril, as said, was once the sword Narsil, with Narsil itself being a sword Tolkien named symbolically. In letter 347, Tolkien says that Narsil in the language Quenya comes from 2 basic stems, Nar meaning fire, and Thil meaning white light. It symbolises the chief heavenly lights, being the sun and the moon, as enemies of darkness. Narsil can then mean fire and white light, or sun and moon. It can then be translated as red and white flame, making Narsil the sword of red and white flame. It was wrought by arguably the greatest crafter of weaponry and armour in the history of Middle-earth, Telchar, the smith of Nogrod in the First Age, the dwarf who forged other magical and legendary items, such as the dragon helm of Dor-lómin, worn by dwarves, elves and men, but most famously by Túrin, who gave himself a name because of it, Gorthal, meaning dread helm. Telchar also forged the knife Angrist, iron cutter, once held by Curufin, son of Fëanor, before famously being used by the hero Beren in the quest for the Silmaril, cutting one of the precious jewels from the iron crown of the Dark Lord Morgoth. With the dragon helm protecting its wearer from wounds and striking fear into enemies, and Angrist been able to cut through steel like it was wood, Narsil was said to fill orcs and evil men with fear, shining with the light of the sun in the day, and shining with the cold light of the moon in darkness. A sword fit for kings, with some readers speculating that it was once carried by Thingol, the king of Doriath. It would reach the men of Númenor in the Second Age, and was wielded by Elendil. After the downfall of Númenor and the founding of the kingdoms in exile, Arnor and Gondor, Elendil would carry this sword to battle in the War of the Last Alliance against Sauron and Mordor. In that dark land, the High Kings, Elendil and Gil-galad, would battle the Dark Lord. All three fell. The blade was broken, and its light was extinguished in Elendil's fall, a fit symbol for the strife that was to come in the approaching years following the High King's death. Isildur, Elendil's son, used the broken blade to take the One Ring from Sauron, before he was later killed in the disaster of the Gladden Fields, the same place he lost the One Ring he had claimed from Sauron. Narsil was last wielded by Elendil. The shards passed to Isildur, and after the disaster of the Gladden Fields, they were taken back to Rivendell by Octar, Esquire of Isildur. These shards were a symbol of the history, lineage, and nobility of not only Gondor or Arnor, but of Numenor, the race of men being unable to return to its former glory while the light of the blade was extinguished. Descendants of kings, carrying shards of a sword, but not the sword itself, a broken history. Even before it was reforged, Narsil was what we would call a legendary weapon, an almost mythical weapon. Its power, if we use that word, did not necessarily come from its keen craftsmanship and interesting properties, but from what it represents, and from its impressive history and lineage.
All that is gold does not glitter, not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither, deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes of fire shall be woken, a light from the shadows shall spring, renewed shall be blade that was broken, the crownless again shall be king.
Narsil was forged anew for Aragorn in a time of crisis, another chieftain of the Dunedain, inheriting a broken legacy in the shards of the blade. The light that was gone had now returned. The Riddle of Strider, those famous words, speaking of the sword as well as the king, both being as important as the other. From the ashes a fire shall be woken, a light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken, the crownless again shall be king. As Aragorn draws the blade, it shines like a sudden flame. Now that Aragorn has taken his place in the company of the Ring, in the quest to aid Frodo, and to return to Minas Tirith, home of the empty throne of kings, those words that go with Aragorn have now come to pass. The destiny of Aragorn as a king of men is unfolding. In lieu of a crown, he carries the sword, and the sword will be his crown until his coronation.
And the stars flamed in the sunlight, for they were wrought of gems by Arwen, daughter of Elrond, and the crown was bright in the morning, for it was wrought of mithril and gold. Thus came Aragorn, son of Erethdor, Elessar, Isildur's heir, out of the paths of the dead, borne upon a wind from the sea to the kingdom of Gondor. And the mirth of the Rohirrim was a torrent of laughter and a flashing of swords, and the joy and wonder of the city was a music of trumpets and a ringing of bells. But before all went Aragorn, with the flame of the west, Andúril, like a new fire kindled, Narsil reforged as deadly as of old, and upon his brow was the star of Elendil.
The reforging of Narsil is a symbol that the true king is returning and will go to war. He will reclaim his throne through the acceptance of his own peoples, reuniting the two kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor. Orcs will rightly fear blades such as Glamdring and Orcrist, remembering their names from ages past. But Andúril is now a legendary weapon amongst other legendary weapons. The blade that took the ring from Sauron's hand, the sword that maimed him, leaving his physical form in the Third Age with only 9 fingers. A constant reminder of the strength of the race of men who arrived on his doorstep and challenged his power directly. Now it was carried by a leader of the race of men, with a just claim to the throne long held by stewards, supported by the most powerful figures remaining in Middle-earth. The best comparison I can make here is that the reforging of this blade is like Aragorn pulling Excalibur from the stone. It is more than a keen and bright blade, but the weapon used to symbolise the glory of the race of men and the return of the king.